Welcome to another episode of Tears for Fears. I'm your host, Megan Shoup. You can follow me on Twitter at Megs08DFS. And as you can see, I am joined by a very special guest today. He is at Del Cote on Twitter and on DraftKings, but I'm joined by Remy, who plays tiers and mass multi-enters all the tiers in all the different sports and especially NFL too. Remy, thank you so much for joining me today. How are you doing? Are you ready to talk some week 9 tiers?
Not too, yeah, I'm doing well. Really stoked for doing this. Looking forward to talking a little tier strategy, and thanks a lot for having me.
Oh, well, thank you so much for joining me. Usually I talk to myself each week and I go through,
Yeah.
My core plays, my favorite plays. It's nice to kind of bounce ideas off somebody, especially someone like you, who again is very successful in tiers. I see him at the top of the leaderboards all the time. So you guys should listen to his advice. We just taped a strategy show, which will be on the FanSpeak network that you can watch anytime. But in this episode, I am lucky enough that he was willing to join me to talk through the week 9 slate. So before we jump in and over to DraftKings, is there any kind of overarching strategies that you have for week 9? Obviously, we have a lot less teams because of bye weeks this week.
Yes. Well, the main thing that sticks out for me is that there are only 2 afternoon games.
Yes.
So there are not a lot of late swap opportunities. So a lot of chips will be down once the 4 p.m. game starts. So we'll have most of the information will be available at lock 1.
Right. And I know when we get to tier 8, there's definitely kind of a strategy that you had based on just the few players that are available. So we can kind of take note in the tiers that do have, late swap available, since it is much less this week. So I'm going to bring over DraftKings and we can go tier by tier. I'll kind of read them and then we'll kind of each go through what players are really sticking out to us. So let me bring over DraftKings. All right. So in tier 1, Remy, we have Josh Allen, Kyler Murray, Tua Tagovailoa, and Justin Herbert. I mean, tier 1 for me is Josh Allen's playing. He's my favorite play, basically. But I know, again, I play 20 lineups, so I don't always play all of them. So my next 2 favorite would probably be Tua and Kyler Murray. How would you rank these guys?
Well, yeah, Josh Allen is the obvious number 1. He's head and shoulders above everybody else in terms of projections. And on the downside, he'll be highly owned, most likely north of 50%, my feeling. Mm-hmm. What scares me is that this game might be a blowout. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering if he'll get any action in the fourth quarter.
That is a concern. Yeah. So will you... by mass multi-entering, do you think you'll come in a little under the 50% on him and then spread out your ownership amongst the other quarterbacks? I
might be over, actually.
Right.
I will have exposure to the other ones. I might actually just be over on Allen. The upside is just, it's too juicy. You can't overlook this. And if it's a shootout, would it be a shootout? And if, he doesn't play in the fourth quarter, well, so be it. We'll just hope that, Jess could put up an early touchdown, maybe an early touchdown in the second quarter, just to keep the game interesting. Yeah. And throughout those yards.
We've also seen him get there in 3 or 3.5 quarters too.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah.
Just out of curiosity, who's your second favorite in this tier?
I like Kyler Murray.
Okay.
For the simple fact that you can bring him back with Geno Smith in tier 5, so you could have a game stack there.
Sure.
Which is the only opportunity this week to stack 2 quarterbacks from the same game. So I will have game stacks with Kyler Murray and Geno Smith. Tua's projections are really poor this week.
Well, I guess maybe not needing to push back with the Bears and
right. He's playing against Chicago. Is it in Chicago? Yeah, it's in Chicago too.
Right.
So question mark there. I will sprinkle a couple with bring it back with Tyreek.
Okay. All right. Well, now let's jump over to, so I'm going to put Josh Allen in. I don't build out the full lineup, but I put in sevens here. So we'll put Josh Allen in. So we go over to tier 2 and we have Stephon Diggs, Cooper Kupp, who is questionable, Austin Eckler, Tyreek Hill, and Justin Jefferson. Geez, this tier is really, really tough for me because honestly, it sounds like Cooper Kupp is very questionable. So yes,
Right.
I believe he's the only 4 o'clock player, you would get him an incredibly low ownership, but if he's ruled out, then you're going to get a 0. So there's that nuance, right?
Right. The best scenario we could hope for is that he gets an injury designation 5 minutes before lock. That would be perfect. If he's ruled out before lock or ruled in 5 minutes before lock, I'm smashing Cooper Kupp.
Okay. Yeah, because he'll still be super low.
He'll be 0. Yeah, right. He'll be 0% owned, and you'll get massive leverage.
Yeah. I like that. I like that strategy, but it's a big, waiting to see if when we get that news for sure.
You have to be near your computer when news hits.
So of these other guys, geez, it's hard for me. I mean, you could definitely do the Diggs, Allen stack, Austin Eckler. It sounds like they're going to be without Keenan Allen potentially too. And he's just racking up the targets. Tyreek Hill's on pace for, the most, breaking the single season yardage record and just going nuclear in Miami. And then Justin Jefferson, you can certainly beat up the Washington secondary. So I love the other 4. I'd say my 2 favorite are, I'd say Diggs and Eckler, but it's tough for me. Who would you say your favorites of the other 4 are?
First glance, definitely Eckler. His floor is massive, so is his upside. And the other player I like is Jefferson, for the simple fact that a lot of people got burned by Jefferson last week. He was highly owned, and he didn't have a very good game, neither did Thielen. So I think it's a good buy low opportunity on Jefferson.
Oh, I like that. I kind of agree with you on the floor ceiling kind of combo there with Eckler. So I'm going to go ahead and put in Eckler as our tier 2 play. We move over to tier 3 and we have DeAndre Hopkins, Josh Jacobs, Jalen Waddle, Devontae Adams, and Travis Etienne Jr. has made his way to tier 3. Wow, that's a big jump for him. So I'll ask you first, who's standing out to you here in tier 3 as your favorite plays?
Hopkins, downside, he'll be highly owned. Jacobs didn't have a good game last week either, so it's another buy low opportunity.
Sure.
If you're playing Waddle, play him with Tua. Don't just play Waddle naked. And Travis Etienne will be very low owned, and he's actually highly projected. He's not too bad. He has better projections than Jalen Waddle. Wow. If we're going right now, we have Allen Eckler. I go with Jacobs.
Okay. Like you said, it's a great buy low spot. I'd say Hopkins is probably the one I feel safest about, but I think, Jacobs is in a great spot this week. So I agree with you there. Okay. So we're over to tier 4 and we have Aaron Jones, Mike Evans has a questionable tag, Dalvin Cook, Gabe Davis, another Josh Allen receiver, of course, T Higgins, and Jonathan Taylor, who has a questionable tag. So you always have to pay attention to injury news. Of course, you have the potential Josh Allen stack. I'd say for me, my favorites in this tier are Aaron Jones, Gabe Davis, and T Higgins. What are your thoughts in this tier?
I can never get Aaron Jones right.
I'm so drawn to the attacking Detroit Lions at this point. So I think that's part of it. But I'm not often on the right side of Aaron Jones. I will say that.
No, that's definitely he's getting to get a good workload. That's for sure. The only thing that bothers me right now is that we have Allen and Eckler, who will most likely be owned. So having Jones, I might actually go with Dalvin Cook with this one, especially since we're not playing Jefferson.
Right. Okay. So
if Jefferson doesn't smash or has a so-so game, maybe some of that workload is going to Dalvin Cook.
Okay, because you mentioned that in the strategy show that sometimes if you avoid a quarterback and or receiver, you take the running back hoping they're getting all that work, right?
Right. Exactly.
Okay, I think that's very interesting. Okay, so we're going to go Dalvin Cook for our tier 4 play. Over in tier 5, we're back to quarterbacks. We got Joe Burrow, Geno Smith, Kirk Cousins, Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, who does have a questionable tag himself, and Matt Stafford. So I'll go over to you. I assume you don't, and this is a good opportunity because I don't even think I talked about this at length in the strategy show, but when you choose a running back, do you most often avoid the quarterback, like in the situation of Dalvin Cook and Kirk Cousins, or a Joe Burrow and Joe Mixon?
Joe, well, except for pass catching running
Sure.
backs, like I will definitely play Eckler with Herbert.
Okay, that makes a ton of sense.
It
Yeah,
makes a
right.
ton of sense, especially with the two receivers being banged up. So he will, he'll have 7, 6, maybe 6, 7 catches easy.
Oh, for sure.
So
Right.
I don't have a problem with that. I won't place Devin Singletary with Josh Allen.
Right.
So it's quarterback by quarterback basis.
Okay. What about Dalvin Cook, or what about? I always struggle with the Mixon Burrow one too.
Yeah, me too. Especially we have Tyler Boyd with Joe Mixon in the same tier, so I probably won't play Joe Mixon with Joe Burrow and play Tyler Boyd instead. As for Dalvin Cook, yeah, I will play with Cousins.
You would play him with Cousins.
I would,
Okay.
not a lot. I'll have a couple.
Okay, so who are your favorite quarterbacks in this tier? Would name again, because I do about 20 lineups, so I do just around 3 in this tier. Who would be your 3 favorite in this tier?
Well, they're all projected roughly the same,
which is kind of a good thing, because then if that actually came to be, you don't have to nail it, right? It's when you get that huge discrepancy that you have to get it right. So
the only thing that scares me is Joe Burrow is very erratic. He can go off for 34 or have a really crappy game. He could, if Brady and Rodgers, their ceiling is, practically the same. They're not going to have a 40-point game.
Right.
Their chances of throwing for 400 yards are very small compared to Burrow.
Right.
They have probably a higher floor, though, so it depends on your lineup, what players you have so far. If you have high ceiling players, maybe go ahead with a high floor player in tier 5. Interesting thing, there are 3 late games spots in tier 5. I would play Geno Smith in Kyler Murray lineups, and otherwise I would probably go with Joe Burrow.
Okay. I kind of like Joe Burrow in a potential bounce back spot this week at home.
Right.
So again, I think he's got the highest ceiling of these guys. So I like your call there. I'm gonna go Joe Burrow here for tier 5. So that takes us over to tier 6, and we have
One quick note on tier 5.
Sure.
Before we move on to tier 6.
Yeah.
Since there are late swap availability, and you say we play Allen and he scores, I don't know, 20 points, very pedestrian game, and you have Geno Smith in your late game, swap off Geno Smith and go with Matthew Stafford.
Okay, just for the ownership leverage,
right? Or maybe Tom Brady or a lower owned quarterback.
Yeah, I think Tom Brady might be low owned too, just because I think both those two in that same 4:00 game are going to both be low owned for sure.
Right.
So that makes a ton of sense. You're saying again, like if the chalk hits, you can get more contrarian. If the chalk fails, you can then go more contrarian, basically. Right. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, so in tier 6, we have DeAndre Swift, who does have a questionable tag, not getting a ton of workload. It seems like the coaches are kind of monitoring that. Leonard Fournette, Michael Pittman Jr., Amon-Ra St. Brown, Joe Mixon, and Tyler Boyd here are 2 Bengals here. So I'll go to you first. Who are your favorite players in this tier?
Definitely Joe Mixon. He has the upside. I think ownership will be spread out in that tier. People might gravitate towards Fournette. DeAndre Swift, he has a Q tag. I don't know about his.
Yeah, he just didn't get a ton of workload last week.
So
I want to say,
if he plays, I don't think he's getting a lot of touches.
Yeah, he only got 5 carries last week, and he did get 5 targets too. But it's he's kind of got to get that touchdown, I think, which he can.
Right. Oh, yeah, definitely. And Michael Pittman always has some upside. He's kind of like Jamar Chase. He could, have 3 pedestrian games in a row, then absolutely smash the next. He's really unpredictable. So, yeah, very low projected though. But my favorite player would be Mixon.
Okay.
Especially that we don't have Joe Burrow in our lineups.
So we did actually put Joe Burrow.
Oh, we do. Yeah, we have Joe Burrow. Okay.
So would you go Boyd here to stack with him?
I go Boyd. Yeah.
Okay. What's your take on Amon-Ra? Do you think he'll be very high in this tier? Because I do like him from just a pure ceiling. Well, floor ceiling. I mean, he obviously gets a ton of targets, and I think he has one of the better chances to be the highest scoring in this tier. What's your take on Amon-Ra St. Brown?
Well, if you're playing a single entry with, I don't know, a 2,000 person field tournament, I'd go with Amon-Ra St. Brown. That's no brainer. And if you're, in the large field, 20,000 entry tournament, I actually go with Boyd.
Okay, so we're kind of building this the other way we've been talking, more large field. So
Large
let's
field.
put Tyler Boyd in, but we do like,
Oh yeah, he's the
yeah,
better player in a vacuum.
yeah. So we do like Boyd, Mixon, Amon-Ra. I like Fournette too. So, and like you said, the other guys, the Swift questionable tag's a little concerning, and Pittman, he's got the ceiling. It's just, he also has the floor, especially with Ellinger at quarterback. But
Right.
since we're building more of a tournament lineup here, let's stack up Joe Burrow with Tyler Boyd. Okay. So over to tier 7, we have Ramondre Stevenson, Kenneth Walker III, DJ Moore, TJ Hawkinson, who just got traded to Minnesota. Don't know how much he'll play in his first week. Chris Godwin, Devin Singletary, Raheem Mostert, and D'Onta Foreman. So I'm not sure if Chuba Hubbard's back. That would be a big question mark, because we saw when Foreman got all the work, that was,
Right.
a great spot for him. And we do have, you could have a little correlation with the Cincinnati players. So, in 7 and 8, you have a lot more players to choose from. For someone like me, who's only playing 20 lineups, for somebody who's only playing 3 to 5 lineups, they probably do want to limit their exposure in this tier. So who are your, 3 or 4 favorite players in this tier?
Since we're not playing again, in the vacuum, the highest projected player is Godwin. Kenneth Walker also projects pretty good. Same thing with Ramondre. Ramondre Stevenson has pretty good projections.
Right.
I'd stay away from Devin Singletary and TJ Hawkinson, especially.
Right.
I don't think Hawkinson's going to get a big workload.
Agreed.
So I concentrate more. And DJ Moore had a huge game last week, so he might come with high ownership.
Right.
Might be a fade. Raheem Mostert might actually be in play since we're not playing any of the Dolphins
Tua or Hill or Waddle. Right.
So that might be into consideration. I take that into consideration. We'll have to wait for the Chuba news on D'Onta Foreman.
Right.
In this case, God, it's a tough one. Probably Kenneth Walker, since we're not playing Geno Smith, and most likely won't play any of the receivers. They both have injury designations and are in the late game.
Right. Okay. But definitely
I'm leaning towards Kenneth Walker.
Okay. But it sounds like we both don't have interest in Singletary or Hawkinson. Foreman, it's going to depend on the Chuba Hubbard news. More, you could, certainly go there, but he'll be high owned. So definitely like Stevenson, Walker, Godwin, Mostert. And so you're saying you like Walker the best in this build without the Geno.
Right. And I keep a real close look on what's going on with the Lockett and DK Metcalf situation, see whether or not they're playing or not. Yeah.
Right.
If they're in or out, that might impact his projections.
Okay. Well, so that takes us to tier 8, and we have both Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf, the only 4 o'clock players, who Remy mentioned is very interesting, kind of strategy for this tier. They are both questionable. So that makes it very interesting. If one of them were to get ruled out, I think they're both going to come low owned. And if one gets ruled out, you could pivot to the one playing and get a massive ownership leverage.
Right.
So again, we have Lockett, Metcalf, and then we have Christian Kirk, Terry McLaurin, Antonio Gibson, Drake London, Romeo Doubs, and Tyler Algier. We'll talk about the Seattle guys separately. Outside of the Seattle receivers, who are your other favorite players in this tier?
Christian Kirk, maybe. He's playing against Las Vegas. They're all projected roughly the same, except maybe for Antonio Gibson, who doesn't come with a lot of upside, although he did have a good game last week.
He had a good game last week, yeah, but that actually surprised me. I'm a Washington fan, as you can see behind me, but that surprised me, quite honestly.
Yeah.
And then I worry about Atlanta, just the lack of passing volume for Drake London. That certainly concerns me.
Oh yeah, definitely. And they don't have a lot of, Terry McLaurin is due for a big game.
He is. Yeah, I always play Terry. Nobody, and I don't know if you noticed this. Terry McLaurin is always low owned no matter what tier, even in tier 8, and he will explode for one. I mean, he's getting the target share. Heineke loves him, so it's going to happen. What week, I don't know.
the week we don't play him, that's when it's gonna happen.
Oh, I actually have a quick story. So it happened last year where in the big tournament, I had a 1v1, I had like a decent finish, but I played, I want to say it was like Cordell Patterson. This is when McLaurin was in a much higher tier at the beginning of last season. I want to say tier 4, maybe. And I played Cordell Patterson in the one that this lineup that kind of hit the nuts in a lot of other spots. And I had played Terry McLaurin, but just not in this particular combination. And if you had, he was 4% owned. And it was, I think, the Atlanta game last year where he had maybe 2 touchdowns, well over 100 yards, and just dominated that particular tier. And he came in at like less than 5% owned. Yeah. And it's like, oh my gosh, a 1v1. I don't think I would have gotten first, but I think I would have gotten like second or third. And I was like, well, that was like an $8,000 mistake.
Yeah,
and it was my favorite player, as you can see, Washington fan. And of course, my favorite player is Terry McLaurin. So that one hurt bad. So I don't make that mistake. I mean, I can't play Terry McLaurin in every lineup, but I do play a lot of Terry McLaurin because he does always come super low owned, and he's got a decent floor, quite honestly, and he's going to have his ceiling game. So anyways, you like Christian Kirk, you like Terry McLaurin.
I wouldn't say like, but
you can tolerate playing Christian Kirk and Terry McLaurin?
Yeah, there's no
okay. Any others outside the Seattle receivers? Any other players in this tier that stand out to you?
No,
this is kind of
absolutely
yucky.
Nobody. It's, we're dumpster diving right now.
I would agree. Well, talk about, I mentioned it. You mentioned it about Seattle, about that late swap. Is that something that you're really drawn to this week for Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf?
Yes, most likely the news is going to come out before lock, I think, at least on one of the two.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully the news comes a couple of minutes before lock, just to give us some time to adjust. If the one or both are, actually doesn't really matter. If only one of them is in, he's a must play. You play him. Don't even, I mean, you could go all in on him because first of all, he's highly projected. Second of all, he's getting 0 ownership.
Mm-hmm.
And if so, I'd go back to tier 7, swap out our Kenneth Walker, and go with Chris Godwin.
Okay. I like that. So essentially, now what would you do? Obviously, if both are ruled out, you pick one of the other, guys that we mentioned. Right. If both are ruled in, is there one over another that you have, or would you just stick with playing more Kenneth Walker in tier 7?
I definitely still go with probably DK Metcalf.
Okay.
Just go with the projections.
Gotcha. Okay. So you like Whitman Metcalf. So I like that strategy. So if one is ruled out, you kind of switch off Walker, go to, like you said, maybe a chalkier play like Godwin, and then just really jam in the one guy in. If both are playing, you lean towards, having more exposure to Metcalf in that tier.
And it also, this is a tough one. It's actually, there's a lot of nuance depending on when the news comes out.
Sure.
You could have Lockett in at tomorrow morning, and DK Metcalf is a game time decision. That's the case, and he's in. I'm going with the least owned one, in other words. So I'll pound DK Metcalf and adjust. If they're both a couple of minutes before lock, both in, most likely go with DK Metcalf.
Okay.
It's a toss-up, really.
Okay. Well, I think we had a great, week 9 tiers, strategy, and we went tier by tier. We kind of picked out our favorite plays. Hopefully this helped you guys. Any final thoughts for week 9 for the people?
No, not really. Just keep an eye out for the news. And to say, this is, every slate is different. Every week is different. This week is no exception. Just not a lot of late swap availability. That's it. Keep an eye out for injury designation and Vegas lines if there's movement at all. Maybe, give us a clue on ownership. But no, that's it.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining me. Be sure to follow @DelCote on Twitter. Again, you're going to see him at the top of leaderboards. He's been so kind to join me. Be sure to check out my strategy show with Remy, where we talked just through tier strategy, and we kind of talked through, hopefully in November, we'll have, or later in November, closer to Thanksgiving, we'll have a short slate tier strategy, because short slate tiers are really fun too. So again, check out the strategy show Follow at Del Cote on Twitter. Again, like this episode, subscribe to the FanSpeak Network. And thank you guys so much for joining us. Good luck in your tiers contest this weekend.